Hi, everybody. This is Michelle Keith. It's 4 o'clock, and I'd like to open up the meeting with a roll call vote for the members that are present. Michelle Keith, Chair, is present. Emily Michelle Olmsted?
Present.
Awesome. Richard Romero?
Present. Sorry about that.
Fantastic. Thanks, Richard. Awesome. So we do have an appointment at 4:02, so we have to wait a little bit to begin that. It looks like Joshua Swain is here for the 404 appointment. I don't see anybody here yet for the 402 appointment. Chris, I know it's not really on the schedule right now. We can always address it later, but since well, actually, we only have a minute. I'll ask the question later. We're almost there.
Yeah, I didn't hear about the meeting being recorded. So if you just want to mention.
Oh, yeah, thank you so much. And please, we do have to do the verbal reminder that this meeting is being recorded, even though you do get a written reminder when you sign in on the screen. We also have to say this meeting is being recorded and has been being recorded since before 4 o'clock. Thanks, Chris, for the reminder. Well, the 402 appointment is in reference to Heather Roy, Plat 42, Lot 45 at 330 Chase Road, Dartmouth, Mass. It's a domestic animal permit request for the following: 2 large hoofed animals, 5 small hoofed animals, 6 chickens, hens, game birds, and 2 rabbits. Chris, did you want to give us an update on this?
Sure, thank you. So I am aware that the applicant is going to try to call in because of some difficulty in accessing a computer. So, the applicant in a conversation to us wasn't entirely sure if they should be able to, but I just wanted to disclose that first. I am concerned with manure management at this location. I know that in the application, it was noted that they were going to try to seek off-site disposal at the DNRT property. I would ask the board if they consider it to consider based on a shorter time frame than we historically do. I would ask, no more than 60 days so that we can monitor the manure management being transported off site. And then, we would revisit it after 60 days. She's in an email, she's saying that she'd like to manage it on site, but I do believe that 2 large hooved animals with bedding, 5 small, being familiar with animal keeping from my own personal experience, that will generate a fair amount of manure that it's not always manageable on site. You can't directly apply that to flower beds. It does require an area where you're going to have to stockpile it and manage it in a way in which you're not going to create runoff issues or other nuisance issues. So I still remain concerned.
Chris, has she identified a location yet?
Well, in an email, that just came in on Tuesday that, she's saying that she wants to manage it.
On site, but did she
Yeah.
say where?
Not really.
Okay.
And in the initial application, I don't like things that come in late like that because then, we all miss it. We prepared the agenda on Friday. In her application, she's, that we included with this agenda, it was that she was going to look to send it to DNRT.
Should we table this until she can identify a location and speak with DNRT and get a chance to talk with us?
You know, I just, you know, I think that we're being given, you know, a more than a, you know, a very, very late piece of information on Tuesday, after the agenda's been prepared for comment. You know, so the board, you know, you can table on a variety of reasons. You could issue a permit, you know, with conditions. You know, I think it's up to the individual members where they want to go.
Okay. I'll ask the other board members. Emily, do you have any particular thoughts on this?
Chris, what would be the brief pros and cons of tabling versus allowing this to go through with a 60-day time frame as you suggested?
So at this point, my concern is that it seems as though from the email yesterday, there is, you know, a change of events that are now causing the applicant to say, you know, I want to just manage it on site. And, you know, without presenting us with any information about how they were going to manage it at the time of the inspection. If someone on a small lot like that said, I want to manage it on site, I would have gone out there to do an inspection. I would have wanted a written protocol as to how they were going to manage it, what area, and ask about manure management at all times of the year. Last year, we had an application in the far north end of town with a large number of small hooved animals. And when we did, you know, the inspections, and the applicant came before the board, you know, there was a lot of concern with, you know, the manure management, you know, the bedding material, and just it's slow to decompose for reuse on site. And ultimately, the decision is that, you know, they truck a lot of manure off site. So you could table to allow more time to address this issue. You could act the information on hand at the time the agenda was prepared, or you could act with, you know, with this new information. The only thing I would caution about acting on this new information, if you were to consider it up for 60 days for management on site, is that we're doing it blindly.
Let me ask one last follow-up question. If we do table this, will it allow your staff to make that follow-up inspection, excuse me, and have more time to have a more solid understanding of that on-site management?
That's correct, so that we could, you know, understand how they intend to and where they will, and either, you know, recommend in favor, against, or recommend with conditions.
Thank you. Excuse me, thank you.
Richard, do you have any particular thoughts?
No, Michelle just asked the question
Okay.
that I had in mind. So if that gives Chris and his team a little more time to consider this or check it out, I'd probably consider that.
Okay, and I think it will also give the applicant a chance to talk with us at the hearing, since she's having some troubles today getting through. And I think that's important to give people access to the board, you know, where they can figure out how to get into the meeting and be there live for any questions. Would anybody like to make a motion, or do you want me to make a motion, or
Yeah, I have an idea for it if you like. So,
Yeah.
finding that there is concern with the manure management, I move to table the animal permit for 330 Chase Road until the next Board of Health meeting.
Can we
And
have
I
a second?
I second the
Awesome.
motion.
Fantastic. Thank you, Richard. Michelle Keith votes yes. Emily, Michelle, how do you vote?
Yes.
And Richard, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Fantastic. So now we can move to the next appointment. Sorry that we're behind. Let's see here. It is 404 appointment for Joshua Aaron Sway, Plat 9, lots 37-1, 36, and 11 at 92 Allen's Neck, 30 Allen's Neck Road, 444 Barney Joy's Road, to amend a piggery permit. Current permit is for 30 pigs, requesting an additional 10 pigs. Chris, did you want to bring us up to date on this?
Sure, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
So I am familiar with this location. You know, we did do an inspection out at the site earlier in the winter as part of the annual renewal process. So Mr. Sway only is looking to increase the number of swine on the permit. We did not have any concerns in prior years with the keeping of animals at this property. It's a large property. It's got a long agricultural use. And, and where they keep the animals is not in any areas that are sensitive. Also, the feeding practices, very, very benign. Unfortunately, historically, pigs have gotten a bad reputation from early pig keeping practices in this country, particularly in the 1920s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s. They were used as a method of disposal of garbage. There is no garbage feeding. We do have standard conditions on Mr. Sway's existing piggery permit that would remain even with this increase if the board was to grant it. Those conditions remain on the permit until such time that the board would rescind. However, what I would note is that these are standard conditions on all of our piggery permits and that they are merely reminders of the board's animal permit and domestic animal regulations, which includes regulations upon piggeries. So no concerns. Thank you.
Fantastic. I see Mr. Joshua Sway is here.
Yes.
Thank you so much for attending. Did you want to say anything, sir?
Only that the increase in my permitting from 30 to 40 is to reflect a change in ownership of the swine as opposed to an actual increase in overall numbers on the property for the other individual that holds a permit on these same properties discussed earlier.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Mhm.
Emily, Michelle, do you have any questions or thoughts?
Yeah, I'm glad that Chris didn't mention any concerns. Chris, just one quick question. You refreshed our memory on the existing conditions about piggeries. Are you suggesting that we read through said conditions, or are you just reaffirming to us we don't need to read through them because they are already in place?
That is correct. I am reaffirming. You do not need to.
Thank you.
Fantastic. And Richard, did you have any questions or thoughts?
No, I don't have any questions, no thoughts. Looks like everything's all in order to
That's
me.
wonderful. Could we get a motion maybe?
Yes. So finding that there are no concerns with this property, that there's been prior years of success and a long agricultural use of this property, that the feeding practices are good and that it's a large property, I move to approve the additional 10 pigs for 92 Allen's Neck, 30 Allen's Neck, 44 Barnum's Joy Road.
And I
Could we get
second the
a-
motion.
Fantastic. Thank you, Richard. And Michelle Keith votes yes. Emily, Michelle, how do you vote?
Yes.
And Richard, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Thank you so much, Mr. Sway, for being here.
Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Take care. Okay, so moving to the next part 2 under new business, we've got the minutes from January 8th of 2025. Does anybody have any comments? I looked through them. They look fantastic. Donna does a phenomenal job as usual. Anybody have any comments? Emily, Michelle?
No.
Okay, Richard?
No comments.
Fantastic. Could I get a motion to accept the minutes?
I move to approve the minutes of January 8th, 2025 for the Board of Health.
And I second the motion.
Fantastic. Michelle Keith votes yes. Emily, Michelle, how do you vote?
Yes.
And Richard, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Great. And now we've got to figure out the Board of Health meeting schedule for March and April. Oh my goodness, those months sound so good. I can't wait until the winter's done. So how's it looking for everybody? Chris, what are your what's the good timing for you?
So it's nice to kind of keep us on like a 28-day, no longer than cycle, just because of the 30-day time frame associated with approvals, otherwise goes into a default. So I would just try to ask that we don't our next meeting, no more than 28 days, and keep that 28-day spread if we can. So that I'm just trying to get into my calendar real quick to just try to lay that out. But some of you may already be looking at a calendar, so feel free to shout out if that would actually, so the beauty of this is that would put us at March 5th.
Okay, I have no problem with March 5th, except that I will be in Singapore, so I will not be able to attend. The hours in Singapore are way, like you got talking a significant difference. So it would be really tough for me to join in. But
How's-
that shouldn't stop the board if the other two folks can be there.
I can, after 5, the 26, 27, 28, same thing. 5 o'clock on those would be ideal.
And I was also just going to ask, Madam Chair, is it easier if we go the week before so that you can attend? I understand you wouldn't hold us up, but
Both of those weeks are when I'm over there.
Gotcha.
After the 19-hour direct flight there, you want to, maximize the
Sure.
time. Yeah.
okay.
But thank
On
you.
the 5th. Yeah, no problem. So then the 5th works for you, Richard, is that correct?
Yes, 5 o'clock if it's possible.
Yeah, 5 o'clock exactly?
Anytime after 5 is fine.
Sure. If 5 o'clock, it would be my preference on the 5th then.
Okay.
And then April 2nd would be the next.
April 2nd is fine with me. 5 o'clock works for me. I don't know about the rest of you.
Sorry, give me one
That
second.
works. That works for me.
April 2nd. Yes, 5 o'clock on Wednesday, April 2nd works for me.
That's fantastic. So we've got the dates. That's great. And now we get to move to the
So,
old.
can we just back up a little bit? Because I don't know when the election is, if it's April 1st or is it the 8th? I can't remember if it's the first or the second Tuesday. I think we might be we're just trying to pull it up. Apologies.
No, same here. I knew this. I actually had taken a look at it at one point in time and. Oh, let's see here.
Because what we could also do, it's April 1st? April 1st. So could we meet by some chance the week before on the 26th?
Yeah, absolutely. What about you guys? Richard, Emily?
No issue.
No issue either.
Fantastic.
5 o'clock?
Yes,
Sounds good.
On Wednesday, the 26th, yeah.
I'm down.
Okay, so I'll set that with that, Chris.
Yes.
Okay, so we'll move on to part 3, old business, the proposed well regulations. And one of the things I was noticing, Chris, just reading through them, it's just a question. I noticed that, there seems to be a requirement that if you're going to have a well and you have access to the town water, that they're not really going to, well, they're not going to let you have a well unless it's for irrigation purposes. And I was wondering, why is that? Because I would think that if somebody wanted a well, you know what I'm saying, they should be able to dig a well on their property. So it was just something that crossed my mind. I was like, why did that become a requirement that if you have access to town water, you can't request a well? Maybe I'm misunderstanding it.
Oh, I know there's a component in these regs, and you got to forgive me because I'm
Yeah.
also in the tobacco regs really deep, and you're putting that, and then also in another big project. So I ordinarily like to be much more familiar, but these things have also been, kind of rewritten. They're the same regs of what you previously saw, although they've been reworded in the review by town council. The only changes to these regulations from what you initially saw was actually a removal of a provision when there is subdivision, and that subdivision frontage has a water line running by it. We had put into these regs a requirement to extend the water line into that subdivision, and that would have to happen by planning board regulation to require utilities to come in. We don't allow, and that was in our earlier regulations, a well to be installed upon a property for drinking water purposes if it is a release site and they have access to town water. And by a release site, I mean an area where there has been a release to the environment of oil or hazardous materials. So
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
not want that, first and foremost, it's a release site, even if it's closed. Sometimes closure options may be different. But also, it's a release site, and we know that, the management of the private water supply, after we get done permitting, even under these new regulations, if adopted, would fall strictly on the owner. So in other words, what I'm saying is when these regs, if they went into effect, you put a well in, you test it at the final plumbing system, and then after that, it falls entirely upon the owner to safeguard. So that's why we really want to discourage wells on any release site if there is that option to directly connect to the town water supply.
Okay, so it was just pertaining to release sites then.
Yes.
Okay, I misunderstood. My apologies. The other thing I wanted to mention is on page 10, 9C, it says hen where it's meant to say when. It's just a little Scrivener's error.
Donna caught that. Yes, thank you.
Okay, good. Okay, thanks. Emily, Michelle, do you have any concerns or questions or thoughts about the proposed regulations or the new version?
Well, Chris, can we talk just a little bit about PFAS and what you were saying in your notes to us? Can you kind of give us that spiel?
Yes. So these well regulations took a while to develop and get to today. And there was, a group of contaminants commonly called forever compounds or PFAS, these per and polyfluoroalkyl substances. They're ubiquitous to our modern life. They're ubiquitous to our environment. They're found in some of the most remote areas. And, there's been reports of it, found and detected in rainfall and in ice at the poles. These, if you go on social media, you might get some advertising about, if you had this condition or that condition, call this law firm for a class action suit. So when these regs were first brought before the board as ideas, we did not include any requirements for testing because of some concerns at that time. And those concerns were the lack of testing, the lack of laboratories to test, and some uncertainty about treatment systems in residential houses. Since that time, and as recently as today, I've confirmed with Mass DEP that there are laboratories, several that are permitted by DEP. They have actually, it's called certified by DEP to test for these compounds. So it's not like there's just one. The testing for these compounds is several $100s individually. So to order a PFAS panel, which is in the DEP well water, public drinking water supply regulations, is about 6 compounds, is several $100s. I know people can get concerned about the cost of anything that government proposes. These are concerns now that are well established within higher public health protection agencies like the Mass DEP and the EPA. So, we'd be looking at a cost of several $100s to test these in new wells. So if you're putting in a new well, then that would add several $100s to the analyte panel. If you got a detection and that detection limit mirrored the 2200 regulations, those are Mass DEP's regulations as it pertains to public drinking water supplies, then the way these regs would work is you would have to install a filtration system before you would get a certificate for a private potable water supply well.
How much do those systems run, Chris?
So those, they're called POET systems, point of entry treatment. What was reported to me by a state official was they range from $5,000 to $10,000.
Wow.
I think it becomes problematic for the board to place a requirement to test, and then if we had an exceedance that wouldn't be acceptable in a public water supply, to then just put that to bed and take no further action when we know that there is a treatment option available. It is a cost. It's $5,000 to $10,000. If it's being incorporated into a new build, you look at what new houses are going for. I think you lose the wow factor. It becomes an issue of how does this board want to address the installation of new wells with this emerged group of contaminants that seems to be at least flooding the airwaves with class action suits for plaintiffs that have been harmed by these compounds, excuse me. I worry that the board may face a concerned citizen in the future now that we're aware of not only more testing options. What I think, in today's day and age is affordable testing options. If you're drinking it and you're putting it in your body and you're putting it in your family's body, what good is an $800,000, $900,000 house if you're jeopardizing their health with what, leading government agencies are reporting as a concern? And how will we address that, knowing that there were testing options and that there were treatment options?
Those are good points. I have a quick question. How many other towns have updated their well regulations to reflect this type of testing?
I am not aware of any.
Okay.
I know that, it sounds like Westport, is in the rewrite stage also by a recent news article in New Bedford Light, but I am unfamiliar. And the other thing I just want to note about these, this group of compounds, some of these contaminants, are coming from our day-to-day lives. Just like another contaminant called 1,4-dioxane, when it was detected out on outer Cape Town, they actually traced it back to septic systems. Because 1,4-dioxane is, a byproduct in certain manufacturing, and that it gets into the wastewater and it cycles back, from the shallow wells into the septic and back into the groundwater. And it's kind of felt that might be what's going on here in Massachusetts. But what we also know is that there's a major investigation going on in Westminster with these compounds, and there is a focus on a large-scale composting site.
That's thank you so much, Chris. I mean, my personal opinion is we're spending the money for town council to update the regulations. And given the fact that we are aware of this now, and I realize the $5,000 to $10,000 is a huge amount of money. I mean, at least to me, it's a huge amount of money. But I just don't see that we can't proceed. Well, first of all, it makes sense while we're updating and paying town council to update these regulations to include it. And two, for the safety of folks, I just don't see that we would be adhering to our mission to protect our townsfolks if we didn't add that. So that's sort of where I stand. Emily, Michelle, do you have any questions, concerns, thoughts?
I have two more questions and I can share my thoughts. And they're both for Chris. So the first one is, Chris, when there's the transfer of property, buying or selling a house, is there a requirement for a well test of any sort, not just for PFAS? Do you know?
This time there is not, and
Okay.
I had, if I could just elaborate on that, I think that's a great idea, but the problem becomes enforceability. So if you're on a place like Nantucket, for example, which does have that requirement, you're dealing with more of a niche of realtors and maybe closing attorneys. But with Dartmouth, where you get houses sometimes that are represented by real estate agents 30 miles away and whatnot, we're seeing more and more Title V inspections. It seems like I'm kind of going off on a weird direction, but even something like Title V inspections, we're seeing more and more of those on median income houses slip through the cracks and not happen.
Got it.
From
Okay.
far off
So
London.
no requirement to test a well, even if there's not a concern for PFAS. And I know that our regulations about regular wells. My second question, and I should have thought of this earlier. Do we have any idea about an estimate for human exposure to PFAS, and if there is a believed kind of primary source of it? Do studies show that it's coming mostly from our food and water? I mean, I could see logically there being a big case for that, but has any of your research is it able to back that up, or can you speak on that?
Yeah, as to, like maybe a pie chart of like where it's sourcing from.
Sure.
Yeah, I have not encountered any of that. Just in the myriad of things where we're exposed to it on a day-to-day basis. I can, within arm's reach, I can grab a office product right now that if I used it, it would expose me to it.
Right. So thank you. I that's kind of where it's tricky. I am divided because I work with water. I keep thinking, when I bought my house, when we were searching for houses, we were concerned about lead. And because with lead the thing is you don't have to test for it, but if you test for it and you find it, you have to do something about it. And so, if that's the kind of thing where basically is when we're all buying our houses, kind of do your own due diligence about what you care about and what's tricky. And kind of where I'm most divided is that if for some reason we are so exposed to PFAS and we don't know for sure that it's more our drinking water than it is anywhere else, which I think that there's everything I know about water and the way stuff moves, I think that there's a strong case for that. I just wish, and at the same time, I see your point, whereas if we as a board, take no action, what message are we sending about our concern about this? So I'm divided at the end of the day is what it comes down to. I'm still thinking on it.
If I may?
Yeah.
So, again, I'm not one, I don't like 11th hour, and I do kind of feel like this is a little bit of 11th hour. The reason why these regulations are on the board's agenda today is that this draft does not have that inserted. What I could do is what we ship off to the Ag Commission has to be what the board wants to finally to deliberate at a public hearing for potential adoption. So if I was to include a section on PFAS, what I would look to do is if the board was somewhat leaning but not entirely in favor of, I could put the language in there. If the board wants to move these to the Ag Commission, if we move these to the Ag Commission without it, then we can only act on what is what was sent to the Ag Commission after 60 days have passed. So if I was to put in a section on the PFAS requirements after 60 days, so I could put it in there, we could send it off to the Ag Commission. It can actually come, you guys can look at it all, talk about it at another meeting. It could be, you could strike it at the public hearing, 60 days later.
An idea.
Do you have any more questions, Emily?
No, thank you.
Richard, do you have any questions, thoughts, concerns?
Yeah, this is mostly for new build, or does it go retroactive to some well water homes?
That's a great question. Occasionally we do see replacement wells. We're fortunate because we pull our water from deep bedrock. It takes a long time for that to be impacted by, a year where you have a weird drought, like we had those droughts this past October and November. Those sorts of droughts don't impact deep water bedrock as much as it does shallow groundwater in the soil. So this would largely apply, 99% of our wells each year are for new construction, for new houses.
Okay. Now, with that, $5,000 to $10,000, it is, it does add to the build, as you know. Is this something that would give the owner, I mean, the homeowners the option to do this type of system, knowing that, all these contaminants could be there, and then having, well, I take that back, because then it doesn't protect it if they resell the house, and the next person, they don't have that option. Yeah, so yeah, it's a lot to think here. think I just-
Initially, there was some thought when we first talked about, as an organization, under prior board members about this, anthropogenic, sources of contamination, human-made influences on the well that would affect health. It was like, what do we do if we have an exceedance? And the thought back then was, well, we'll just tell DEP because they have all the standards. So in that set of regulations in statute called the Massachusetts Contingency Plan, which deals with the release of oil and hazardous materials to the environment, there are what's called GW1 standards. Those are the standards that if you exceed it, you become a release site. But what we know is that with private drinking water wells and exceedances, like PFAS, unless there was a source, like what's going on in Westminster, they really they're not going to go after homeowners on something like that and say, now you have to hire an LSP and you're going to go through the whole MCP process and, deal with your property now as a release site. So, to deal with it in that manner, say, well, all you got to do is notify DEP, and we'd be setting ourselves up for more problems because we know that there's not going to be a follow-up on these detections, unless there was an imminent hazard. Maybe if there was an imminent hazard, which I think is, I don't know if that's over 60, I forget the number, but if you hit an imminent hazard, then perhaps there might be some remedy. But I have to say with a lot of uncertainty, because if you were the only one with it, there may not be a remedy for you. Typically what will happen is some, DEP will come in a bigger investigation area and deal with the imminent hazards. But I'm not necessarily sure they would do a one-off, especially on a new build. On a new build, they're going to say there's no imminent risk. So let me retract that. If there's a new build, there's an imminent hazard level, but there's nobody living in the house. So why did we spend the Commonwealth's money to address it? Sorry.
So, what are the other board members' thoughts about having Chris add the section to be able to send it to the agricultural committee, just so we can get their feedback on it? And then we can always end up moving to strike it after the fact.
I'm in favor of that.
Yeah, a little more information wouldn't hurt.
Chris, that would be okay with you if we would do that? We just have them draft up the possible section, send it for comments from the agricultural committee, and then come back to it again and discuss it. They may even have some thoughts on it.
Yeah, so just for clarity, we'll take this set of regulations that you've all been provided with the agenda. I will insert a section in there for PFAS testing that will mirror the 310-2200 regulations for the 6 per and polyfluoroalkyl substances, particularly section 22.07G. And we'll put that in, and I will have the appropriate methodology listed to detect that. Because if you notice in our regs, we list EPA laboratory methodology.
Yes.
We would have to specify that. So put that into the regs, I'd ship that off to the Ag Commission. And then, you know, for the next agenda, you'll see those draft regs that were sent to the Ag Commission.
We don't need to vote on this, do we, Chris?
You do not need to vote on this to send it to the Ag Commission.
Okay, good.
Unless there's concern and, but if the board's all individually in favor, we do not need a formal vote.
Okay, that's fantastic. Everybody's pretty much in favor of that?
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. That's dynamite. Okay, so let's see here. What else do we have? Chris, do we have anything else?
That's it.
Okay, I'm gonna make a motion to adjourn at 4:40. Can I get a second?
I'll second.
Fantastic. Thank you. Michelle Keith votes yes. Emily Michelle, how do you vote?
Yes.
And Richard, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Fantastic. Everybody enjoy wonderful February. Hope it's gentle to us.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Take care. Thanks. Bye-bye.
everyone.